Hello, my dear students. A very warm welcome to all of you in Shri Jayendra Rank Zone. I am your friend and mentor for the subject Business and Commercial Knowledge. In this lecture, we'll begin with Business Chapter 4, that is Government Policies for Business Growth. All the concepts will be covered in the coming series of lectures. Let us continue. This is lecture number 1. Government Policies for Business and Growth. We'll begin with the learning objective. Learning outcomes of this chapter. So after studying this unit, you will be able to highlight the pervasiveness of the influence of government policies on business. Influence of government policies on business. Explain restricting, regulating and facilitating government policies. Describe the major shift in government policies on business since independence. Explain the concept and importance of liberalization. Explain the concept and measure of global policy, globalization policy. So we'll understand about liberalization, globalization, and privatization. So describe privatization as a source of new opportunities for business growth. Let us continue. Chapter overview. Indian public policies. First, the economic reforms that made by the government, globalization, liberalization and privatization. We'll understand in detail about these three policies. Policy outcomes, foreign direct investment, FDI, and economic growth. 4.1 Introduction. Raman was a computer since graduate and he developed an app-based solution for blind students. Ali, his friend, was a CA rank holder. Ali had 3 offers from 2 big audit firms and one from a consulting company. Raman understands technology, but he does not know finance, law, and government policies. On the other hand, Ali has no exposure to technology, but he understands patents law, IPR, intellectual property law, intellectual property rights, GST formalities, financial reporting and corporate governance issue. Ali understands the commercial possibilities of Raman's innovation. They form a team to pitch for arranging funds and for venture capitalists. I believe you understood the story till here. Legal processes, tax policies, business restrictions, financial reporting of any nation follows from government policies. Naturally, government policies are sine qua non for all spheres of the economy. Not only the startups developed by young entrepreneurs like Raman and Ali, the big companies also face a number of policy issues followed by a state. In Bangladesh, as a state policy, import of second-hand foreign cars is allowed. Toyota steers this policy to their favor. Second-hand Toyota cars are sold in numbers through Toyota-approved dealers in Dhaka. Refurbished cars collected from buyback scheme are sold in Dhaka market. Toyota manages several service stations in Dhaka, Chittagong and Rajshahi to provide after-sale services of cars. On the contrary, in India, as a government policy, no foreign car manufacturers are allowed to sell imported cars. They need to form a wholly owned Indian subsidiary or to be a part of joint venture. Toyota manufactures cars in India as a joint venture with Kirloskar Motors. Every nation defines its mode of governance through a number of policies. These policies are described as public policies. In the national and international parlance, public policies are as old as the governments. In the post Second World War period, a number of transnational companies evolved which started to work in different parts of the world. They align their operations according to the public policies of those nations where from they operate. If we go through the human resource challenges of a heavy vehicle manufacturer, Volvo, we see that they have approximately 95,000 employees all over the world. The company promised to treat everyone with respect. They want to foster an inclusive culture where everyone can contribute to the full potential and be accepted for who they are, regardless of their gender identity, nationality, ethnic origin, religion, age, sexual orientation, any disabilities, etc. Here lies the challenges of the company. The gender equality policies are not similar in all countries. So varied are the policies towards ethnic origin cases, religious issues, etc. That is, that is why they make Herculean efforts every day to promote an inclusive workplace for increasing diversity. They framed the Volvo Way and the Volvo Group Code of Conduct, which outlines the minimum expectation for all employees. In fact, all large corporate houses align their corporate policies according to the set government policies of the host nation. Policy framework in India, a historical sketch. In India, a lot of discourses, research, and experiments on public policies used to take place in an old age universities of Takshashila, Vaishali, Nalanda. During the time of Emperor Chandragupta Maurya, the great intellectual guru of the Emperor Chanakya outlined the public policy of the state. He authored the book Arthashastra, a conceptual framework of statecraft and public policy. In Greek city states, the Roman Empire, public policies were center of attraction. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle had a number of discourse on public policy. During the time when Ashoka the Great ruled Magad, he introduced the policy of peace and harmony. On the other hand, Gupta defined various policies on taxes, trade, and welfare. In Delhi, in Delhi Sultanate, Alauddin Khilji introduced a stringent tax reforms, whereas during the time of Akbar the Great, land reforms were introduced under the leadership of Todarmal. In all the forms of governance, be it oligarchic monarchy, aristocracy, tyranny, and democracy, public policies were formulated and implemented. India attained freedom in 1947 with the partition of the nation. Riots and famines broke out in different parts of the nation. The new government of India faced a mammoth development challenge. Strong policy making was required as the nation had a diversity of language, cultures and inequalities. The existence of multiplicity of princely state, lack of industries, lack of enough food grain to feed the huge population of the country. A fragile banking system remained on other problems. Thus, India was looking for strong policy decisions. Policy in the contemporary global economies. In the contrary, In the contemporary world, the strong economies like US, European nations like Germany, France, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, Japan from Asia have clear-cut policies on governance, economy, market, taxes, duties, and military spending. The emerging economies like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, commonly known as BRICS nations, have distinct policies on governance. The Socialist and Communist states like China, North Korea, erstwhile Soviet Union, used to set highly controlled public policies. To cope up with the varied economic problems and demands of the people, every single government has to outline these policies. This chapter endeavors to explain the meaning and types of policies. It will also highlight the different components of a policy. It will especially focus on India's economic reforms in the year 1992 and the major changes in policies since then. The chapter especially concentrates on the monumental efforts of the changing post-independence policies. The efforts are commonly referred as to liberalization, privatization and globalization. LPG. Liberalization. Liberalization of economic policy refers to the gradual decrease in the government command and control over the economic policies. Government will liberalize the procedures, government will liberalize the tax, will do the tax reforms. So simplification of tax structure, removing quotas, bars and economic restrictions are some examples of liberalization. Privatization in its pursuit from means form means transfer of government ownership to private hands. In real life, it is done in different forms. In some cases, ownership of all shares is transferred from government to a single highest bidder VSNL was taken by Tata Telecom. In some cases, a large chunk of shares is sold to public, but majority shares are in the hands of government. ONGC, SAIL, State Bank of India, etc. Globalization refers to taking off restrictions in exports and imports of goods and services. It also covers the measures of lifting the trade barriers between the two countries. The trade restrictions should be taken out. So three policies: liberalization, privatization and globalization. Meaning of policies: Renu visits National Library and frequently orders a plate of vegetarian thali at rupee 30 a plate. The similar thali in the nearby railway canteen is available for 45 rupees. She gets the similar food at rupee 210 at a big restaurant in the city center. India follows the mixed economy and that is why state provides subsidy on food in libraries, instructs railway canteen operator to charge very reasonable prices fixed by the government. However, the restaurant at the city center may charge good amount of margin. In England, you do not have to pay a single penny to enter in a British museum and National Art Gallery, though UK follows capitalist economy. It has several socialist principles ingrained in the state policy. In any nation, policy making process is related to political actions. Longbank Gabriel Alman outlined political system as a set of interaction having structure, each of which performs its function in order to keep it like an ongoing process. It is a set of processes that routinely converts inputs into output. These outputs are public policies. An autocratic ruler looks for policies which dominate over public freedom. When India was a British colony, public freedom was conspicuous by its absence. Tax rules were stringent on Indian traders, whereas democracy frames liberal policy. In the Indian democracy, we have several political parties. Leaders are free to argue in the parliament. State and the center have many shared responsibility. People's grievances are heard. There are several legal systems to take care of disputes. Almond classified these inputs of political systems into generic functional categories like political socialization and recruitment, interest aggregation, interest articulation, and political communication. Output activities are those which are carried on by the political system in response to demand or stress placed upon the system in the form of inputs. Output generally take the form of government policies, program, decisions, etc. David Eidson propounded another model on politics policy relationship which is known as feedback on the black box model. This model identifies that there are many societal demands which are not included in the decisions and policies designed by the state. In course of time, the government tried to look for some avenues to look for a feedback process towards public policy, and these processes are known by the policy reforms. We frequently observe such black boxes model in India. Government makes several experiments in tax, human resource policies and change them on public demand. The indirect tax regime has been changed with the introduction of GST with effect from first replaced by a car act new act in a year 2013. Public policy. Rohit sells firecracker in Delhi. He was fined by local police for selling firecrackers with an expired date license. Sukhbir employed 34 full-time workers in his garage. He was advised by his chartered accountant to pay provident fund contribution for all of them. Ranga was not allowed to enter Kuwait by the immigration officer as he has several visa stamping in Tel Aviv airport in Israel. So these are the policies. Bharat was imprisoned for 3 days in Singapore as he violated the traffic rules. Cook was driven out of India in 1977 as the ruling party was a strong believer of Swadeshi. All are instances and example of policy. For these examples, we understand that public policy is guided by social, cultural, and religious factors and political factors. In the 1990s, Coke came back to India. In India, a small fine is there for traffic rule violations. But in Singapore, traffic rule violation is taken as a major offense. Due to the political differences with Israel, immigration officers in many Arab nations declines entry of foreign visitors having multiple visas stamping on their passports. Licenses and PF issues are then taken seriously in India. These public issues are not only diverse intention, FDI, foreign direct investment policy of an Indian government drives its origin from the country's economic standpoint, whereas respect for all the religion is more of a cultural fabric designed by an Indian constitution. The keeping of The policy of keeping special compartments for ladies in trains emanates for socio-cultural perspectives. Thomas R. Dye says that public policy is whatever government chooses to do or not to do. Richard Rose says that public policy is not a decision, it is a course of pattern of activity. Public policy, according to them, is a summation of decisions followed by many. India is a pluralistic society, therefore, there are many opinions. We have a complex legal system, whereas in Dubai, laws are stringent but very simple. In Carl J. Friedrich's opinion, public policy is a proposed course of action of a person, group, or government wherein an environment providing opportunities and obstacles with the policy was proposed to utilize and overcome in an effort to reach a goal, to realize an objective or purpose. In US, Martin Luther King fought for the rights of black people. In India, Swami Vivekananda had an inclusive approach towards the downtrodden, socially outcast people. Indian policies are directed for the upliftment of socially deprived classes. From the aforementioned discussion, it is clear that public policies are well through of governmental decisions, and these are resultants of various social and economic activities which the government undertakes in pursuance of clearly defining goals and objective. The nature of public policies has the following characteristics. First, public policies are always goal oriented policies. These are formulated and implemented in order to attain a certain objective wherein the government has in view for an ultimate benefit of the masses in a welfare state. These policies clearly spell out the program of government. For example, the banks are instructed by the government to initiate financial inclusion plan and they are bound to open branches in villages. Opening of low frill accounts under Jan Dhan Yojana had been made mandatory. This policy of financial inclusion is a goal oriented policy. Second, public policy represents the outcome of government collective actions. It means that it is a pattern of course of activity of the government officials and actors in a collective sense than being as their discrete and segregated decisions. The whole legal system of India stands on collective actions. The courts of law, starting from a magistrate law to Supreme Court, the duties and codes of conduct of judges, the involvement of lawyers and public prosecutors, the role of police and forensic experts, the appointment of juries are examples of the collective actions taken by the government. Third, public policy is what the government actually decides to choose to do. What choose to do? It is the relationship of the government units to the specific field of political environment in a given administrative system. It can take a variety of forms like law, ordinance, court decision, executive orders, decisions, etc. In India, most of these public policies are written statements and these are decided by government and other regulatory bodies. Next, public policy is a positive in the sense that it depicts the concern of government and involves an action to a particular problem in which the policy is made. It has the sanction of law and authority behind it. Negatively, it involves decisions by the government official regarding not taking any action on a particular issue. This could be a policy. In nations run like autocratic military dictators and dictatorial minority, we see exceptions and their public policy turns often negative. For entrepreneurs and business houses, it is very important to know the major fundamental policy followed by the government before entering to a new country. Components of public policy process. Problem identification, then policy formulation, policy adoption, implementation of the policy, and then evaluation of the policy. This is the public policy. This is the public policy process, PPP. I repeat, first of all, formulation of policy, adoption of policy, implementation of policy, evaluation of policy. Getting it? Identification of the problem, formulation of policies, adoption of policies, implementation of policies, evaluation of policies. Let us move ahead. Public policy process is a continuous in nature. It involves certain distinct components as shown in the above figure. These components are interconnected by various types of communication and a multiplicity of feedback loops. In India, the law making has a distinct process. The Indian Parliament at a central level and legislative assemblies are councils wherever applicable as the state level are the law making bodies. In Parliament consist of two houses, Lok Sabha, House of the People, and Rajya Sabha, Council of State. The process of law making in relation to Parliament may be defined as the process of which a legislative proposal brought before it and then translated into law of the land. It depends on the society to decide which issue should be enacted. Law is an effective part of governmental policy. In many parts of India, water is considered free, but in real life, government spends huge amount of money to clean water to make it fit for drinking. The government may institutionalize a new policy to stop wastage of drinking water. Rainwater harvesting has become an integral part of the building in many cities. The process of new lawmaking in India may be broadly divided into three stages: phase, legislative phase, and post legislative phase. Pre legislative phase comprises identification of need for law or the amendment of existing legislation, drafting of proposed law, seeking inputs, comments from the different ministries, and public revision of the draft bill to incorporate such inputs and getting the same vetted by the ministry, the law ministry, and then presented to the cabinet for approval. The proposed legislation is brought to the parliament and referred to the standing committee. After the cabinet approves the bill, it is introduced in the parliament. On the introduction of the bill, the ministry of the concerned department may send a notice demonstrating the intention that the bill may be moved, considered, and passed, be referred to the select committee of the house, joint committee of both the houses, or for eliciting public opinions. The House votes on the bill with amendments, if any. If the bill is passed in one house, it is sent to another house, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. Once the bill is passed in both the houses, a copy of the bill is sent to Legislative Department of Ministry of Law, Justice and Scrutiny. Post scrutiny by Ministry of Law and Justice, it is presented to the President for assent. The President has right to seek information and clarification about the bill and may also return to it for Parliament for reconsideration. After the President gives assent, the bill is notified as an act. These communication and feedback interact in a number of ways. Policy making is a dynamic process. Public policy in almost all cases lays down several directives rather than detailed instructions on the main lines of action to be followed. After main lines of action are decided upon, detailed sub-policies that translate the general theory into more concerned terms are usually needed to execute it. A policy decision making can result in social action. The policies are most socially significant decision making, such as most public policy making are intended to result in action. Also, policies directed the policy making apparatus itself, such as efficiency drives in government, are action oriented. Public policies and nature of public policy. Public policies are of three types: restrictive public policy, regulatory public policies, and facilitating public policies. Restrictive policies curtail all the benefits in some particular issue. For example, customs duties may be imposed to protect the Indian products. See, many a times it happens that the foreign products or the imported products are, the it's cheaper. So what? And so, if the Indian importers are importing the foreign products from the rest of the world, from different nations, that products are cheaper as compared to the domestic product which are manufactured in India. So the domestic there is a issue for the domestic industry. That domestic industry needs to be protected. So what government do as a policy is they impose heavy taxes on import. So import duties, custom duties, and because of the custom duty, import duty, the imported products, the price of imported products become is a bit expensive as compared to the domestic products, and the domestic industry in India are able to survive in competition with the imported products. The next is regulatory policies. Regulate the activities of a particular sector of an economy. The regulator checks deviations in set practices and policies. Reserve Bank of India is a major regulator for banks. As RBI regulates the money market, forex market operation. Securities Exchange Board of India (SEBI) was formed to regulate the equity, bond and derivatives market, including mutual funds. Insurance Regulatory Development Authority (IRDA) is a regulator of insurance industry in India. Next is facilitating policies. Facilitating policies are one of the which policies an activity that facilitates an activity. The conductive policies towards a development of MSME, micro, small, medium enterprises as governed by the Micro, Small, Medium Enterprises Development Act 2006 are an example of facilitating policy. The formation of National Skills Development Corporation (NSDC) is another facilitating policy of Government of India. We'll learn more about these policies in the next chapter. Next topic, post-independence public policy. If you look at the Indian economy at the time of independence, it showed all signs of stagnation. About 47% of the population was below the poverty line in 1951. At that point of time, 72% of the workforce was employed in agriculture. Agriculture contributed to nearly 50% of the Indian national income. Industrialization was a very low level, with only 2% of the workforce employed in industries. In addition to this, there was hardly any investment in industries. The industries which were predominant were cotton, textile, and jute industries. They also suffered a major setback as at the time of partition, major jute processing areas went to East Pakistan, today it is Bangladesh, and as a result, there was a shortage of raw material. Indian economy was suffering with low agricultural output, little industrialization, low figure of national income, high poverty, unemployment, slow economic progress. Soon after independence, the government was looking for guiding policies to make India economically viable. Public policy formulation and implementation involves a well-planned pattern on courses of activities. New government of India identified a thoroughly close-knit relation and interaction between the important governmental agencies, the political executive and legislature, bureaucracy and judiciary. Naturally, Constitution of India was framed and accepted in 1950. The constitution of the nation outlined the nature of policies to be taken for growth and development of the nation. During the time of independence of India, two major political thoughts were refining the world. The United States of America followed a strong capitalist model of government with a strong private sector and individual ownership. Freedom of choice was the buzzword. Government role was to provide a smooth business and work environment. On the other hand, Soviet Union followed a communistic model where the state owned everything, all sorts of production were in the hands of the government and a strong public distribution system, food and other needs. Many of the Eastern European nations signed to Warsaw Pact and followed the communalistic pattern of economy. The Western European nations like Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany followed a capitalistic model with the presence of several socialistic drives like public transport and healthcare systems. The government of India followed a mixed economic path, a mix of policies borrowed from both capitalistic and communalistic economic policies. The first major goal of Indian public policies is the post-independence India was the area of socio-economic development. Wide-ranging policies were formulated in India. Policies were formulated in the area of industrial and agricultural development. Many policies were included Many policies were included into statutes like Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951. Others are kept as directives in the previous plan document. Indian government had a strong dictum against imports. It was done in order to develop the nation's new industries. After independence, what happened? After independence, Planning Commission was established to make economic plans for a period of 5 years, 5-year plans. For all the policy directions, a 5-year plan became the major source. These policies were of two types, ones of regulation and others of promotion. It may be noted that the Niti Aayog Planning Commission has now replaced the Planning Commission. Laws let down what could be done or what done by and not done by the entrepreneurs. This could be in a larger area like what goods can be produced by the public sector, whether certain goods can be produced only by the government agencies. Laws also specified how state agencies themselves were to provide goods and services like electricity, transport, etc. The Government of India undertook similar responsibility in the social sphere, but socio-economic transformation was not the only problem when India became independent. There were also problems of national integrity. External environment was a source of threat, and the country had to develop suitable policies to defend itself from other countries. Apart from this, there have been internal challenges. Regionalism has given rise to separatist tendency that have to be countered in a long-term perspective. The word include not only defense policy but also similar efforts at decentralization that creates greater national cohesiveness. Thus, since independence, public policies in India have been formulated with the view to achieving socio-economic development and maintain national integrity. These goals have been complex, demanding coherent policies. This has been a difficult task because goals have had to be divided into sectors and subsectors. Many a times the policies have been contradictory. What may be rational for economic development may not be so for national integration. Thus, the need of a strong center to cope up with external threats It is important but may go against the principle of decentralization, which provides the greater national cohesiveness of a heterogeneous society. This is the reason why ascertaining of actual impact of public policy becomes a necessity. Next point, the economic process, the economic change process. The economic change process. Mixed economic policies provided a lot of social protection to people, but industrial development was low. The fall of the Warsaw Pact nations, including Soviet Union, birth of small states around Russia, formation of European Union, pressure of heavy development loans from agencies like IMF, World Bank, ADB remain the major reasons behind ADB remains the major reasons behind India's journey towards liberalization. The efforts of the globalization coupled with liberalization remained a major shift in policy. India decided to embark upon faster course of economic journey through multiple reforms program in 1991. The economy was aiming to raise growth potential. Globalization as a policy helped India in integrating the country's economy with the world's economy. Industrial policy was formed first through the new Industrial Policy 1991. It opened up the foreign capital inflow. The removal of restrictions on investment in projects helped many businesses sector to expand. This changes the policy also allowed increased access to foreign technology and funding on the other. Infusion of foreign funds in strong currencies helps a nation to build a strong foreign exchange reserves to buy foreign technology. Foreign funds come in different ways. Foreign institutional investor FIIs are a big fund houses which invest a strong market and also engage in speculation actively. FIIs bring huge investment. There is also a risk to leave a nation after offloading their portfolios. Non-resident Indians, NRIs, that is non-resident Indians, and OCIs, overseas citizens of India, invest the foreign currency in India to get better returns. They also enjoy the residential status, but the government actually looks for FDI, foreign direct investment. FDI means setting up industries. FDI not only brings forex investments, that is foreign exchange investment, it also enhances employment opportunities in India. Apple and Samsung had started their plant in Haryana near Gurgaon. So they both the companies have come up to India as a FDI policy. So they are starting their manufacturing units in India. So make in India concept of the governments is also getting better. Secondly, the Indian youth is getting employment. So Apple and Samsung is creating a lot of employment opportunities for the localites and for the whole of India. These are the benefits of FDI. A series of measures which were taken towards liberalizing foreign investment included: first, there is dual route of approval of FDI, foreign direct investment. The Reserve Bank of India articulate the areas of automatic route and the union government outline the process of approval through government route. Next, automatic permission was granted for technology agreements in high priority industries and the process of removal of restrictions on FDI in low technology areas as well as liberalization of technology imports. Third, permission was granted to non-resident Indians and overseas corporate bodies (OCBs) to invest up to 100% capital in high priority sectors. Fourth, hike in the foreign equity participation limits to 51% of the existing companies and liberalization of the use of foreign brand names. Signing the Convention of Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agencies (MIGA) for protection of foreign investments. These efforts were these efforts were boosted by the enactment of Foreign Exchange Management Act (FEMA) 1999 that replaced the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act (FERA) 1973, which was less stringent. In 1997, Indian government allowed 100% FDI in cash and carry wholesale, and FDI in single brand retailing was allowed 51% in June 2016. After a long debate, further amendment was made in December 2012, which led FDI to 100% in single brand retailing and 51% to multiple brand retailing. The presence of Samsung, Sony, Coke, PepsiCo, HP, Microsoft, General Motors, Hyundai, Honda, Toyota, Volkswagen, Volvo are some examples of FDI presence in India during the post-liberalization days. These companies have come up in India. Many of them are doing manufacturing in India and they are distributing their products all over the world, including India. Let us move ahead. Need for reforms. The next point is need for reforms. During the planned regime with high rate taxation, dysfunctions were visible in different areas of the economy. Most of the public sector undertakings were running under losses, their efficiency remained poor, and per employee production was also low. Strong trade unionism crippled the growth of private sector. The union was not there at that point of time. Restriction in trade stunned the quality of Indian products. The government of India took huge loan from various sources like World Bank, Asian Development Banks and IMFs, International Monetary Fund, etc. The loan repayment schedule was like the noose around the neck. Inflation was very high and reserves of foreign currency was at very low. India's spending on defense was increasing and there had been huge demand of infrastructural developments in India. India was always helped by Soviet Union. The freedom movement in Soviet Union loomed large. In the mid 1980s, the Soviet Union got broken and 15 independent states were formed. Russia also opened up its economy. Capitalism got a new breeding ground in Russia and other erstwhile Warsaw Pact nations like Poland, Albania, Czechoslovakia, Hungary and Bulgaria. Questions were raised in India mixed economic system. Government of India started various experiments on its way to economic freedom. Gold was mortgaged at Bank of England and foreign currency loan was arranged for meeting the foreign currency reserves. In 1992, finally, the government of India took revolutionary steps to open up the economy. A massive change in economic policy was laid down. Private sector was given a priority. 1992. Many of the loss-making public sector enterprise PSEs were decided to be closed or divested. Some of the public sector enterprise was first corporatized and the capital was valued and it was large chunk of shares would be sold to public. The process is known as disinvestment. Further, a number of private sector banks were given a license to run banking operations in India. Policy, decision and goal. A policy emanates from decisions and decision is taken in line with goals. Many a time, the terms like political goal, decisions, and policy are used interchangeably, but they do not mean the same. In real life, individuals, organizations, and governments are constantly taking decisions, but all the decisions that are taken cannot be categorized as the matter of policy. The essence of decision making lies in the fact that one has to make a choice from multiple alternatives available to them. In order to take decision, there must be more than one course of action. Thus, decisions in the act of making the choice, the entire act of decision, the entire act of decision making has been developed on the conditions that can improve the activity of finding multiple choices. In India, the policies are concerned with the general welfare and development of the society as the nation is a welfare state. The government efforts like creation of education, the government efforts like creation of education and employment opportunities, national defense, economic progress and stabilization, laws and order issues, creation of new states, anti-pollution legislation, etc., are the results of substantive policy formulation. These policies have vast area of operation affecting the general welfare of development of the society as a whole. They have been formulated keeping in view the prime character of Indian constitution, socio-economic problems and the level of moral values of the society. Regulatory policies are concerned with the regulation of national and foreign trade, business safety measures, public utilities. This type of regulatory policies is laid down by the independent organization that work on behalf of government. In regulatory activities, these policies are made up by the government pertaining to those services. Some policies are called distributive policies which are meant for specific segments of society. It can be the area of public distribution to public below poverty line BPL, public welfare, justice for women, health services. These mainly included all public assistance and welfare programs. Some more examples of distributive policies are adult education program, food relief program, social insurance program, immunization camps, etc. These all are a part of policy of the government. Generally, government make policies for the welfare of the society, for the upliftment of the poor, because any government wants that their citizens or countrymen should be healthy, should be educated, should be uplifted, they have a better standard of living, they have a better education, so they would be accepted in the world. India is the largest democracy and the union government decides the national goals to be followed. The union government, the central government, all the state governments have their own legislative assemblies and they outline their goals in tune with the national goals. In the national parliament, the issues of development, defense, trade and commerce are discussed and debated. The national goals are translated into decisions These decisions are put into actions by designing legislations in the form of acts. The union government through different ministry, for example, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, and various regulatory institutions like RBI, SEBI, IRDA may issue codes, guidelines, and statutes. These mandatory and recommendatory documents became the public policy statements of the nations. The process of liberalization was a major policy shift in India's economic journey. Liberalization made the rules of foreign trade simpler. Foreign exchange related rules were simplified. It became easier for Indian corporate houses to do business abroad. The competition rules, the IT Act, the intellectual property rights codified the act of globalization. Foreign funds started to flow in the form of FDI, that is foreign direct investment. The FII, foreign institutional investor, were permitted to invest in the equity shares quoted in the Indian stocks. The privatization drive helped the government to generate a pool of resources, and the stock markets witnessed a number of PSU companies getting listed. Privatization. India initiated its mammoth privatization program in 1991 as a part of the policy stance to usher in macroeconomic stabilization and structural reform efforts to cope up with stagnation, slow growth in extremely difficult economic condition. At that time, the rate of inflation was very high. The foreign exchange reserves declined to a dangerously low level. There was an ongoing domestic consensus that state owned enterprise were not getting adequate returns and were suffering from low efficiency, and the government expected that the privatization of these enterprises would lead to a better outcome, better efficiency. In this context, the two main objectives of privatization in India were to raise the revenue to ease the fiscal crunch, to raise revenue. Second, to improve the profitability and efficiency of the divested enterprises. To enhance the profitability and efficiency, in the 1990s, the Government of India national budget and huge fiscal deficit and negative balance of payment BOP in trade, this boosted the government's desire and necessity to extract and release the massive investment made in the state owned enterprises and led to privatization in India. The major thrust on privatization paved way for foreign direct investment and rapid liberalization of business regulations, fiscal policies, industrial practices, and protocols as well. Privatization as a strategy had been experimented in the Western world a decade earlier than it experimented in India. During the prime minister during the prime ministership of Mr. Mangeet Thatcher, during the prime minister of Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, British coal mines were privatized. Many of the components of national healthcare services of school education services were privatized. Privatization refers to the managerial approach of changing the ownership structure of one or more government owned institutions. Privatization can be advantageous in terms of the higher flexibility and scope of innovation it offers, along with the cost saving many a times. However, it has an adverse impact on the employee morale and generates fear of dislocation or termination. It looks for accountability and quality in production and service system. Privatization can be successful if diligently scrutiny by the decision makers is attached to the policy concerned. In the Indian context, privatization effort was not easy. There were hardly any takers for loss-making PSUs, public sector industries. On the other hand, there had been many takers of surplus making industries like oil drilling, refinery companies, or once the mineral extracting sectors like Steel Authority of India Limited, SAIL, or NDMC National Mineral Development Corporation. Government decided to privatize the loss making companies fully and the profit making ones and banks partially. The efforts of privatization was accepted by the society with a lot of resistance during the inception of economic liberalization in the nation. Privatization helps in a big way to enhance market potentials by enhancing efficiency, quality, and competitiveness. Privatization is an essentially effective tool for rapid restructuring and reforming the public sector enterprises in India. Also, witnesses in other nations, public sector entities remained inefficient as far as the profitability and quality is concerned. They were running without a significant objective and mission. The private sector, on the other hand, is perceived to be more self motivated, prolific, and reliable for superior quality of products and services, though these are the exceptions. There are exceptions also. Privatization may be conceptualized in following prominent types. First, delegation. Government keeps hold of responsibility and privatized enterprise handles fully or partially the delivery of product and services. There is active involvement by government. Delegation may happen through contract, franchise, grant, etc. Next is divestment. Government surrenders partial ownership and responsibility and sells the majority stake to one or more private entities in course of time. Third is displacement. The private enterprise expands and gradually displaces the government entities, deregulates, facilitates privatization if it enables private sector to challenge a government monopoly. The government monopoly through BSNL and MTNL has been displayed by the private sector. Disinvestment, selling a proportion of ownership stake in a public sector to private parties. Next is FDI, foreign direct investment in India. Foreign direct investment plays an important role in the process of development of a nation. In most of the cases, capital sourced from foreign sources for domestic sources remain inadequate for the purpose of overall development of the nation. So, foreign capital is seen as a harbinger of growth. In a sense, it is like filling the gaps between the domestic savings and investment. In the post liberalization and privatization period, India was considered a lucrative place of FDI inflow because of huge domestic market. For a closed economy, any national program of privatization for its success needs a successful move towards globalization. Globalization creates a wide market of goods and services. At the same time, foreign funds flow in an economy to be invested in various industries. Foreign funding in good sense creates employment as well as demand. For a steady flow of foreign funds, liberalization of economy is required. Liberalization is always paired with regulations, rules and regulations. FDI may be described as a flow of capital investment to an enterprise in a nation by another enterprise located in a different nation by capturing a majority of the stake and ownership in a company in a target country or by expanding operations of an existing business in that country. Permission of FDI, foreign direct investment, is not uniform in all sectors. Some sectors it is open up for 100% FDI is possible. It is allowed up to 26 for some sector, for 49 and 51% in some of the sector in India. Foreign direct investment has always remained a bone of contention, and FDI in multi-brand retail defense are classic examples. It's often felt like media and defense could compromise on India's security interest, and hence FDI should be permitted. In certain areas, FDI limit has capped, like in insurance business, the cap is there. Where there is no approval through the automatic route, the company concerned has to seek permission from the Foreign Investment Promotion Brand. Here are few sectors where FDI is prohibited under both the Government of India route as well as the automatic route. First is atomic energy, lottery business, gambling and betting, business of chit funds, Nidhi company, agricultural excluding floriculture, horticulture, development of seeds, animal husbandry, pisciculture and cultivation of vegetable, mushroom, etc. Under controlled conditions and services related to agro and allied sectors, the plantation activities other than tea plantations. Next, housing and retail estate business, excluding development of township, construction of residential commercial premise, roads or bridges to the extent specified. Next, trading in transferable development rights (TDRs). Next, manufacture of cigars, cheroots, cigarillos, and cigarettes of tobacco or of tobacco substitute. Recently, Recently, there has been tremendous increase in the FDI inflow in India. India generally receives FDI from US, Britain, Singapore, Japan, and the USA. Next is foreign institutional investor. Foreign institutional investor FII. We often come across the terms FII, which represent the foreign institutional investor. FIIs are the large foreign group with substantial investable funds. FIIs are registered abroad with a view to investing in other nations to invest in the equity market, hedge funds, pension funds, and mutual funds. FIIs have a strong research team which speculate to invest in a country with a possibility of strong return in equity market. These funds park their funds to fuel a bullish market. Naturally, for small period, the nation experience inflow of strong foreign currency in its financial system. Whenever market reaches a peak and starts declining thereafter, these funds move to another nation. So the euphoria is short-lived. FIIs. No wonder national governments look for sustainable FDI investment over FII investment. I believe you understood till here. I believe you understood. Let us understand about FDI, foreign direct investment. FDI is in which a process in which the resident of one country, that is home country, that is home country acquires ownership ownership of an asset in another country, in another country. That is the host country. That is the host country. Such movement, such movement of capital, such movement of capital involves ownership, ownership, control and management, control and management of the assets, of the assets in the host country. In the host country. Thus, FDI are real investments. FDIs are real investments in factories, assets, land, inventories, etc., and involve involve foreign ownership, foreign ownership of production facilities, production facilities. Definition: as per IMF manual, FDI refers to all investment involving a long-term relationship, involving a long-term relationship and and reflecting a reflecting a reflecting a lasting interest and control of a resident entity in one economy, in one economy, in an enterprise, in an enterprise, resident in an economy other than that of the direct investor, the direct investor. Next, control. Lasting control occurs when acquisition acquisition of more than 10% of the shares, more than 10% of the shares of the target asset, of the target asset. Thus FDI, foreign direct investment, involves the acquisition of at least at least 10% of the voting power in an enterprise by foreign by investors. Next, components. FDI has three components. FDI has three components: A. Equity capital, B. Reinvested earnings, and C. Other direct capital in the form of intra-company loans between direct investors between direct investors, that is parent and affiliate affiliate enterprise. Next, who can be foreign direct investor? Who can be foreign direct investors? Individuals, private or public enterprises, private or public enterprises, incorporated or unincorporated. Associated groups, of individuals or enterprises, Next, government or government agencies, estates, trust, or other organization. Next, Any combination of the above mentioned entities. Any combination of the above mentioned entities. So this was about foreign direct investors. Next is types of FDI. Types of foreign direct investment. FDI may be categorized as under. FDI may be categorized as under first horizontal FDI, horizontal FDI, foreign direct investment, foreign direct investment in the same industry, in the same industry abroad, abroad as the investor, as the investor operates in home country, operates in home country. Dutch mobile company, Dutch mobile company invest in mobile, invest in mobile company in India. In India, it is an example of horizontal FDI. It's an example of horizontal FDI. Another example of FDI is vertical FDI, vertical foreign direct investment, vertical FDI. Foreign direct investment in a related industry, in a foreign direct investment in a related industry abroad, abroad, which provides, which provides raw materials, which provides raw materials, inputs, services to, services to the investors, services to the investors business in the home country, in the home country. I believe you understood this. Example, example, publisher of book based, publisher of book based in Europe acquiring, acquiring printing facilities, printing facilities or printing firms in US. Printing facilities or printing firms in US. Next, conglomerate FDI. Conglomerate FDI. Foreign direct investment in a business, foreign direct investment in a business that is unrelated to the investor's existing business in the home country, in the home country. Example: Swiss dairy company Swiss dairy company investing in telecom sector abroad, investing in telecom sector abroad. I believe it is clear. Next, foreign institutional investor. Next is foreign institutional institutional foreign institutional investors, that is FII. FII are FII are large foreign groups large foreign groups with with substantial with substantial investable funds investable funds. Next, FII FII are registered FII are registered abroad with a view to investing in other nations to invest in equity market hedge funds pension funds and mutual funds and mutual funds. Next, FII have a strong research FII have a strong research team which which speculate to invest in a country with the possibility of strong return in equity market. So these foreign institutional investor FII park their funds to fuel a bullish market and also engage they also engage in speculation activities speculation activities. Next, FII. FII bring huge investments. FII bring huge investments, but there is also a risk. There is also a that risk that they may leave a nation. They may leave a nation they may leave a nation after offloading their portfolios, offloading their portfolios. Hence, government look for hence government look for sustainable FDI, sustainable FDI investments over FII, FII investments. I believe you understood till here. I believe you understood. We are stopping here. We are stopping here. We'll continue from here in the next class. Thank you.